I'm going to transition into the next part of this, which is to have a conversation with Carl Handlesman. And I'm just for background, Carl, I think I'm just going to kill this slide and ask you to step up if I can make this work. Stop share. Okay. Okay, Carl.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Stephanie.
Okay, hey, great. So let me introduce you before we start chatting. I've known Carl for a really long time in his various personas. We first met through the business development community in Boston when I was doing BD, and Carl was doing BD at a very hot startup called Millennium Pharmaceuticals, which was a long time ago. But from that, we both ended up moving here. I think Carl, you beat me by a few years. Before he left Boston, he got his MBA at Sloan MIT, and he also has an MS Genetics from Harvard Medical School. I always wonder why he's so smart about science, and I'd have to read his bio to remember. So he came out here and connected with me through Lean Launchpad, a class we both taught. I brought into UCSF. It's now the basis of I-Corps, the NSF and NIH programs. He was a senior advisor, he is a senior advisor at Roche Ventures Fund. He's a member of Life Science Angels, and he has been angel investing under the name Codon Capital, which he's now flipping into an actual venture capital fund. So he's been investing for 15 years, more, 20? How long? 20 more? Okay, never mind. A lot of years. He's been investing. And the interesting thing is that he's seen both sides. He's participated both as an angel investor and a venture capitalist. So he's going to talk about, the differences and what each class of investor is interested in. And did I leave anything out of your bio that you think is significant? The beer, that you make beer in your basement?
Oh, yeah.
You want to?
They're the fermenters. Wow. There's the brew kettles. No, I think that's a good background. I do know a lot about science, but that's because I'm just curious. I hang out with a lot of really brilliant scientists and drug developers. So, anything I learned in school has been dwarfed by what I've learned from them.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing who we know around here.
Yeah.
So let's start with angel investing, because if you're a super early stage company, that might be where you want to start things. So why don't you say what it means? What is an angel anyway? What does it mean to be one, and how do you invest?
Yeah, so angel investors basically are individual investors. They should be a qualified investor, so there's some sort of net worth definition of that. But basically, they're investing their own money, and they can make decisions quickly, and they can be extremely helpful. But remember, when you take money from an investor, they get ownership in your company. And that ownership is forever, right? So if an angel is an angel because they don't get along with anyone, they can end up being a drag on your company. So angel investors, the thing about Silicon Valley that's a little bit different is there's Googleaneers and super angels. And so angel investors, depending on where you live, it could be $50,000 to, many tens of millions of dollars.
Those are pretty super angels. Is that what we call them in the Valley?
That's what I call them.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Super angels, and you've seen a bunch of people who are high net worth, like someone like Sean Parker will start these institutes, and there's just a lot of the ecosystem, but it's basically it's more individuals is the way I think of angels.
Yeah. So let's forget the super angels for a while because I never can find them when I'm looking to get something funded. They must be hiding in the trees
They
down
throw good parties.
yeah, in Portola Valley or wherever. So talk about an average angel. Like, what would be a typical amount of an angel investment?
Yeah, so I'm a member of the Life Science Angels, and this is a group where a bunch of angels come together and they share due diligence, and it can be more efficient for the entrepreneur, and they can get a higher level of feedback, and then you can entice, maybe raise some more money because people that would be on the fence, they hear from someone that has greater expertise than them that, wow, this is really great. The other thing that's nice about the Life Science Angels is they understand that the company with angel financing needs to go on to in order to be successful. You can't take too much. So that's another important thing about
Meaning
angel.
you can't be greedy with the equity that you take. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if yeah, you know, a lot of times people think, well, as an investor, you're going to want to get as much as you can, and I can't think of a more horrible disincentive for the team. Like if you put a small amount of money in and you own 90% of the company, who's going to do the work and why are they going to do it? So one of the things that's fueled Silicon Valley is the value of stock options, and not just, especially in biotech, not just the founders, but also the people, the very, very experienced, talented people that you're going to need later. They're going to want stock options too, and that really helps the team work together towards the goal of whatever they're trying to do, whether it's a therapeutic or it's in digital health.
Yeah. So go back to the money question. What would be a typical angel investment?
Yeah. So angel investments can be they can be anywhere from sub like 400,000, 250,000 to I've seen angel rounds where they get up to $3 to $4 million. One of the things that's been very common is a thing called a safe. And because remember I talked about you don't want to take too much, but you don't want to take too little. So what if you misprice the value of the company? You might inhibit the founders from going out and raising money later from a bigger pool of money. So a safe basically says I'll get a 20% discount to whatever you raise money at.
Yeah. So it's a mechanism to basically take a loan and pay back the loan with a reasonable interest rate, maybe 6%, something like that. And but there's an incentive, an extra incentive, which is this discount. So so that's something that Y Combinator, the famous accelerator, got made popular, and it's been adopted. Would you say pretty widely in the Valley?
It has been. One of the problems with safes is if it's not priced. So there's a example of I'd rather not get into the specifics of it, but we're out of UCSF where someone took a lot of debt that was supposed to convert once he raised a bigger amount of equity, but he was able to sell his company, and then he basically just paid back the 6%. So
good deal for the entrepreneur.
Well, it's a good deal, but I think that investors get involved and we're part of the ecosystem, and we need to mutually support each other.
Yeah, which is one of the nice things that's typical here in the Valley.
Yeah, actually, I can give you another example. So there's this other group called AngelList, and Jenny Rook, who's a very good, she now has her own fund that invests in synthetic biology called Roche Ventures. But I knew her before she started, when she was just on AngelList. And I noticed that she was doing a early stage note with Zymergen, which is now grown to be a big synthetic biology company. And that note was priced. And when they went to
what does that mean, priced?
So they can say, well, so they ended up raising their Series A at I think it was over $100 million pre-money, which was a healthy valuation. And then the note that we had, I think, had a upside cap that if you raise it 100 million or a billion, it doesn't matter. Our price is going to be as if it was, say for example, 20 million.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's another thing, and that's not unfair.
So there's a lot of sophistication in what you just said, and I don't know where everybody is on this call. So things like Series A is the first venture round. Pricing it is pricing for equity. I can't remember what other terms you use, but yeah. And so maybe we'll get some questions about that later on.
Sure.
Okay. So if you're an angel, I mean, one thing we have here in the Valley is we have angels who know what they're doing. They've been around, they've been doing it. They have backgrounds in science sometimes or often. They have access to experts and so on. That's not true necessarily in other parts of the country. There are some other strong ecosystems, but we're very lucky to have that expertise. So if you as an individual angel, when you're investing for Codon Capital and you're looking at a deal, what is it that you're vetting? What's important to you in investing?
Yeah, so there are three fundamentals the way that I look at investing, and it's so what before we get into what I think the criteria are. So every investor and every venture capitalist has a different answer to this. And so when you present to them, they might say, well, I think X, Y, and Z. If you fix those things, it doesn't mean that they're going to invest, because they may not, we see so many great things. It's not that your thing sucks. It's just that it's not as compelling.
Mm-hmm. How many deals would you screen before you just? Let me see. I'm trying to put this in a way you could answer. Like, okay, so in a year, you make how many investments as an angel?
So in the last 7 years, I've made 27 investments, and I consider that to be fairly active. And one of the things that helped propel that is a lot of the companies I invested in were able to drive to acquisition and exits in less than 18 months.
Nice. Yeah.
So then you're like, wow, now you have more money. And a lot of times the same team will reconstitute itself after they sell the technology. Because a lot of times they want the data, they want the IP, and they don't want the people. Mm-hmm. And also the people, the reason they're in a startup is I can talk a long time about this. I mean, startups are different. When we taught this lean launch class, which is now part of NSFI Core, there's like this famous saying about how startups are not smaller versions of big companies.
Right.
And they walk through all the reasons why that is.
Yeah.
Now, the cool thing about biotechnology is I was able to invent a corollary to that. And the corollary is they are also biotech startups are not larger versions of the PI, the academic lab that it came out of, because the goals are totally different. The people and the expertise that you need and the goals are just entirely different.
Yeah, well, we'll have to come back to that. That's worthy of a lot of questions from the audience. Sure. All right, so I'm back to your numbers. So you're investing in about 4 companies a year.
Yeah.
And to get to those 4, how many do you look at?
Well, so if you exit with a great team and they're about to do another thing, I mean, you got to do that, right?
Of course, yeah. They're proven. They made you money.
Yeah. So that should also, when you're talking to someone, understanding that they're not only comparing, you're new to them in many cases. So you're being compared to the things that have been successful, the ways that the patterns that they think they've noticed, how you fit into those patterns, and so I because I'm part of the greater ecosystem, I interact with a lot of people. So, and I'm involved with a lot of programs and incubators. I'll go and give talks, and I'll give people, people ask my opinion about stuff, and if if I have a half hour and someone catches me and they're an entrepreneur, I will give them, I'll tell, let's spend that half hour and maybe I can help you.
Yeah.
So over time, and actually there's a startup in UCSF that was in the UCSF garage, and they were trying to make spider silk by fermenting it in yeast. And I knew that there was two key technical points, and these were really good synthetic biologists. And they actually had half the year they had orb weaving spiders like growing webs on their lab bench.
I've seen the picture. Yeah.
So I always asked them the same two questions. And like, because I knew for 30 years people would try to do it, and those were two technical. And then so like actually when they solved those two technical problems, they called me, and they knew exactly what I was interested in.
Yeah. So relationships matter.
But it's also, it's the interplay of information, learning. I happen to be interested in this field, and so I love talking to them about it. And I, because I had looked at this field before, I knew what were the technical hurdles that had killed every single other company. And believe me, there were lots of other companies over 30 years that tried that. So the technology trick that people are employing to do some of these things that should be new. But a lot of times this stuff's been tried before.
Yeah.
And understanding why it failed. Unlike IT, biotechnology, the technology itself often fails. And that's a bigger risk than customer adoption. If you cure cancer, like you're going to make money.
Yeah, I think. So let's talk for a minute about spinning things out of the university. I know there are a number of people from UCSF on this call and from other universities.
Yeah.
What's the challenge? Like inside the university, we think we've got it all. We do our experiments, our preclinical, and we're like, oh, cool, we got a p-value of whatever. But so what's different when you spin it out?
Well, let me start with something that. So the biggest problem with spinning out is exactly what you said. When I was part of a big venture capital fund, we did an investment in antibiotic company. You're recording this? Okay.
We should be. Yes, we are.
Well, okay. You're about to hear people. Harvard may sue me for libel.
Well, it's only available to people who are pre-registered or in the class.
The Harvard license for this technology, the terms were they were too high. And actually, when I invested at the Series A, I actually flagged it as a really big risk. And people were like, no, we'll be able to renegotiate with the university. And like, who at the university is going to say we deserve less? Right? I mean, I don't even, just ethically, right? They can't give up something. It just, especially if it's a public university. So I have a lot of empathy because there's this idea that we're going to fill in funding or create more funding or create revenue sources, or that we deserve to participate. And that's been accelerated, especially in therapeutics, by this whole push for translational medicine, translational research. Let's go from the lab bench to the clinic, to the bedside, to the patient. And it just turns out that the expertise is not resident in academics. And
so what's missing? What's wrong? I mean, we have a lot of people who are very educated, have great credentials. What is it that's missing when you try to translate it out?
It's they don't know what they don't know, and you need people with decades of experience, and the technology gives you a way in. But the thing that nobody talks about in startups is, like, a big company says stuff is too early. What they really mean is, we make decisions based on data, and we think that there'll be when you run the experiment where there's a go, no go to experiment, we think it's going to be a no go, and then we're going to be done. So there's no point in even doing it. Startups frequently, in my experience, almost always hit a no go decision, and then rather than giving up, they improve, invent, and whatever around the technology, and that's where the magic happens. Because if they do manage to figure it out, and the great teams really do, which is back to what do I look for? Team. That's one of the three things. is and so the university people think, well, the academics think, well, without my idea, you wouldn't have had no place to start. And that's true, but it totally discounts in my opinion, the heroic work that the people do at companies to really convert these things. So agreeing on like what something's worth is a big impediment. The second thing is getting the right team and people around it that can accelerate it. So you want people with, especially if it's a therapeutic, you want people with the experience.
So we just got a question from the audience, which is sure. What's more important? Is it the team or the idea?
Okay, so this is like the famous jockey or the horse, right? Well, you bet on the jockey or you bet on the horse. You know, I actually vet ideas that by having potential team members that I think would be great at doing that, I involve them in the due diligence process.
So it's the team first, and then they decide if the idea is
someone who's been successful before. If they look at something and they go, I can't do that. There's a couple of different answers. They'll be like, I can do that, but it's not that interesting, so I would never do that. But I can tell you a lot of people who could do that. And so that sounds like low-hanging fruit. That should be great. That's like death. You want to stay away from that because it's going to be. Then a lot of times they'll be like, I can't do that, but if someone could do that, that'd be amazing. But I'm the wrong person.
Okay.
So that makes me excited about the idea, but now I got to find someone that has that special ability to improve. So you know, scientifically they've got to be a scrounger, an inventor. My partner Mitchell Mutz, he founded this company LabSite. He was one of the early people at LabSite, and they basically make nanodroplets pop up out of the well, and he does it with sound. And you know, he's an inventor on 36 published patents, right?
Yeah.
And when he got started, he's not an acoustical expert. so he is now, but that was just like what he had to do. And when they would show demo the device, people thought it was fake. Like they were it must be, yeah. So but it turns out that ended up being something very valuable.
Cool.
Yeah, the team, but to answer the question, so Stephanie's goal here is that, you know, someone asked a good question. So team or idea, what's a great team doing with a crappy idea? By definition, it's a stupid.
But what about a great idea and there is no team, or, you know, minimal team?
I bump into that stuff all the time. So if you Google my name, and this is more of an angel investor thing, in 2011 at Stanford, there was the International Synthetic Biology Symposium, and they had this SynBio, you know, Future of Synthetic Biology Slam session. And so you can Google my name and watch I talk about the beer yeast genome manifesto.
Let's not go there, Carl.
No. But this is important. So
you're making a point. Go ahead.
I had 60 things that you could do by modifying yeast, and I talked to all the experts. And one of the best experts said, you know, of all the things that go into beer, the least expensive ingredient is the yeast, and they already can make beer without needing these properties to be better. And so I was like, wow, this is not a good idea for a startup. So I had the whole idea that and the factoid is the flavors from beer come from the yeast, and there's like hundreds of different yeast strains, and if you could engineer them, you could make fusion hybrids, you could do all sorts of cool things. Okay. So I bump into Charles Denby, and he goes, someone told me I should talk to you. I go, Why? Well, I'm hacking the yeast genome to do a beer company. And what's the first question I ask them? Someone type it in.
Could we move past
Okay, let me
yeast and
get
beer?
so.
Okay,
So,
I'm done.
no. Seriously, let me finish. So,
Okay.
so he goes. I go, well, what property are you going to go for? He goes, I'm going to put the hop flavor pathway into the yeast, so you don't even need to add hops. Hops is the most expensive ingredient in making beer, and it's the most variable. So the point was, I love this idea. I could do it as an angel investor. I thought about doing it as the entrepreneur. I was like, I should just do this. And I was like, I don't have a business case for doing this. It would be, even if I funded it myself, it'd just be a vanity project. But when Charles told me that, my next words, I'm going to invest. And I helped him. This is another thing you're going to get to about your angel questions. My investing helped catalyze a proper venture fund to actually put money into a Series A.
Okay. Can we move? I'm past angels right now, so
okay.
We got to move on because we don't have too much time left. So you're now a corporate venture capitalist with Roche. So what's the difference? There you go. Good background. Okay. Your other persona. So so what's the difference in investing as a VC from being an angel investor?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a good question. So first of all, you have greater resources, but you also, now you're part of a team and you have different priorities on the types of, like, what is the goal of the corporate venture fund? So the Roche Venture Fund is run by Carl Handlesman. She's been in charge of a corporate venture fund longer than anyone in any industry. The fund is not strategic. What does that mean? It means we don't have to run to the head of research and say, what should we invest in, or can we invest? We don't need permission. A lot of the corporate venture funds, they need some sort of buy-in that the startup strategy is in alignment with their strategy. So you've got a whole other extra step involved with that.
So do you still, when you're investing as a VC, I get the strategic versus non-strategic. Yeah. Is team still super important? Is it the idea? Is it the technology? Is it the team? What is it?
Yeah. So sometimes, so every venture group has its own checklist of what they're looking for, and I think because I win using team, technology, and syndicate, which is the financing path, that's what I look at. But the corporates have their own checklist of different, of slightly different things. But I think those three, I think, are the fundamentals. You get those right, and you're in the ballpark.
So what stage would a VC come in the company? Would a VC look at, 2 faculty members and some IP? Would they want a lot more than that?
Yeah. So sometimes it's not out of academics. So Mitchell Mutz funded, he co-led with Polaris out of the Roche Venture Fund. He co-led a company with no data, just an idea, and no IP coming out of any academic group.
That's unusual, though.
It's unusual, but they had the reason is they had an entrepreneur that had a really good idea, and he's actually an entrepreneur in residence that started many companies. His name is Alan Crane. He's an absolute genius and one of the nicest. He's a super nice person, but also one of the smartest people. And he created this company from scratch, and they did, and it's already IPO'd in 2.5 years. They're in the clinic. It's amazing. And part of that is he brought on very experienced drug developers who've done protein engineering project. So they got the right people involved. So,
okay.
I'll stop there.
A clarification. Thank you, Tom, for the question. What's a syndicate? A syndicate is a group of investors who come together to make an investment. That's a syndicate. And typically there's a lead investor. So let's say Roche Venture Fund leads, and then there might be 2 or 3 other firms that come in to round out the round. That's duplicative, to finish out the round. Yeah, hope I answered that for you. Thank you for letting us know what you don't understand, because as I said, we don't know what everyone's background is yet. What would be a typical investment in an A round? How big would that investment be, and what is it? What's the investor's expectation will happen with that investment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Series A's, Carolyn Bertozzi just did a thing where the Series A was 50 million, all from one venture fund.
Yeah, that's pretty unusual.
And then a more typical is like 10 to 20 million. Oftentimes, with half the money might go in at first, and then if you prove out that works, you get the other half. And then the pre-monies on that go anywhere from sub 10 to 20 or more.
Okay, so again, definitions. A Series A is the first venture round. So before that, you're doing seed investment. There's not a number. Sometimes it's called Series Seed, but it's not a venture capital round. And angels don't get a name or a number or a letter, but venture capital, first round is A, and then there are B's and C's, and I've even seen companies with G's, which is not a good sign.
So there's this myth everything takes like $1 billion in 10 years. Don't do those.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Again, the numbers thing. If you're a VC, if you're a VC, you get flooded. Certainly true of the prime VCs around here. You get flooded with proposals every year. Probably thousands. Would that be accurate? You think thousands?
I mean, basically, I don't look at anything unless it's referred to me by someone.
Yeah, so that's a very key thing you just said. So say that again.
I don't want to look at anything unless it's referred to me by someone.
Right. So all these venture firms that say, send in your business plan info at, it's with some website or some application form, forget it. It's meaningless. People are like Carl. They're flooded with proposals and business plans, and there's no way you could vet all of them, and it's really about relationships in the network and so on, right? Yeah.
But I do talk to a lot of people who, with just to help them. So I was recently talking to a really good entrepreneur. She's got a great idea. She's raised $400K from friends and family, and this is relevant so that's like angel money. And she doesn't have the right pieces to attract venture. So she's trapped. She's taken this money, and it's not going to take her far enough to do anything. She can do 400K worth of work, and it'll all be very good work, but it doesn't really get you anywhere. It's not far enough.
That's the concept of milestones.
Yes.
So talk a bit about that. Is when you take money, what's the expectation?
Well, the most important thing is before you even go and ask for money is don't confuse operational milestones with what you really want is a business case where I can get to evaluate a milestone that's operational, but it's valuable to someone. Someone will see that and go, yeah, that's cool.
How do you find out what that milestone is, what the investors think is cool?
I think I think you should talk to people in industry, because even if you find an investor that says, oh, that's going to be a cool thing, and you hit that milestone and you both agree, ta-da, and then nobody's interested in what you've done, it's a bad thing. And we've seen companies that have done that, where the investors, the VCs, very good VCs, can just be ridiculously wrong about what actually is needed.
Yeah, interesting. I always think you guys are on top of all this stuff, but not always.
We're on top of certain things and we know how to do certain things, but we look at lots and lots of different things and we know lots of things, but the people that are there day in and day out, they're executing, you got to think about, well, if that works, where does it get me?
Yeah.
And that's why you want to think of, like, if you raise angel money, does that lead you to being able to raise more resources, a Series A? So the woman that I was talking about that's kind of trapped, it's going to be hard for her to raise a Series A. There's a group that does work, that can do a lot of the work that she needs done, and they've actually built companies before, and they've got a really great entrepreneur there. And I was like, yes, you need to. That is the way to win.
Yeah.
So I was encouraging her to speak with that group. So she'll give up, rather than giving up money to an investor, she'll give up money to a group that can help her move to a point where this would be very financeable.
Yeah. I'll just tell the audience, Carl's been a great mentor. And this is something we see in the Valley so frequently, is people, they just want to help. They want to, what's called, pay it forward. And, no expectation of getting anything out of it. Just, this is what I need to do, is to help other people who aren't in the same place I am. If you're a partner in a venture firm, how many deals would you take on personally each year?
So I've got a very good track record, but I would do, on average, one every 18 months.
Right. Say that number again. It's really important.
One every 18 months.
One deal every 18 months. So just in context, these venture firms are getting huge numbers of approaches. They toss a whole bunch of them because they don't know who the people are, but they still look at a ton of them. And each partner is going to invest in less than one a year. If they're like Carl, maybe they take on one a year. So the numbers are really play against you. You have to have something special, and you have to have a relationship that's going to enable you to get viewed.
Yeah, it's like, you think you're a great athlete, you meet with us, you've got your and you say, watch, I can run a mile really fast, and you finish, and I'm thinking, where's your jetpack? Right? Because we're used to, yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay, we're just about to go into Q&A. So last question for Carl, and I see questions building in the chat, which is great. Put your questions in there. We'll cover as many as we can, and I think we're prepared to stay after 6 for any of you who want to stick around.
Sure.
So last question. We're in COVID. We're all Zooming these days. We're not doing what we used to do, which was show up in your office and take out our pitch deck. Thank you, Carl. Prepared for everything. Take out your pitch deck and try to establish a relationship if you didn't have one before, and give Carl a sense of how great a team you've got and what the dynamics are between you, and so on and so forth. So the question is, are you investing in people you didn't know before?
Yeah, it's kind of an unfair question, because I'm watching a proper fund, so I'm fundraising as well. And that's, and we've already got a couple of things lined up that we'd like to invest in, but we'd like to have more capital.
Yeah, but think about the Roche Ventures side.
Roche is still doing, they're still looking at things, and there are a lot of, so there's a lot of activity. And in terms of partnering with pharma, I mean, people are working like crazy. I think they're working harder than ever before, and they're doing, so typically it takes 18 months from first contact to get a deal done. COVID didn't exist, and just look at all the COVID deals and so the biotech, so the best answer to your question is, Stephanie, like everything in 2020, I don't know. There's stuff happening. We got to try. And we all have our own ways of coping with it.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, if you're going to do a startup, you already have you've already crossed into the zone where you're going to have to adapt and overcome. You've already picked a path that is going to be hard, and I'm sorry, it's going to be harder. It sucks.
Difficult time. Let's turn to some questions. I'm reading through the chat now. So here's a question. What is an angel's typical expectation for equity? As an advisor, not as an investor.
Oh, yeah. Well, so I decided very early on that I was going to be a straight vanilla investor. There are lots of advisors. There's a really good company on the East Coast that, someone decided, talked the founder that he needed a CEO, and I should be your CEO, and he hasn't been able to get rid of him for years, he's not helping. So equity is precious. So on the other hand, you can't do it all alone. So, and there are a lot of, and just because, and I've seen this many times, you may start with, a few people, and you chop up the equity evenly, but someone doesn't belong there anymore. So just make sure everything vests, and be very careful with advisors. It's they think it's like the same thing with universities, but if you give them more, they think they deserve more than it's worth.
I think I was talking about this with someone the other day, maybe someone on this call, about what an advisory agreement might look like. And typically it's a 2-year agreement, and some small, very tiny percentage of equity, less than 1%. There's a range, but it's, you would never want to sign a forever agreement,
right?
Because then you can't get rid of them, and maybe they're not going to be that helpful. But there are standards out there, so you want to.
That's fine. That I've no what Stephanie just outlined. That's fine. I've seen other things that are horrible. I mean, a company I invested in as an angel, I was helping a lot in the business development, and we were able to sell the company, and I was very, very active, and the founder was like, you deserve founder shares for that. And I said, oh, that's great. Of course I want them, but let me put on my board hat. I said, didn't Carl promise that he was going to be an active value added investor, and now he's going to take founder shares? Forget about it. Out. Yeah. So it's nice. You want to create. I mean, the early stage is tough, so we want to create a lot more. And I'm fortunate I can play that role. So
I'm going to let Mark ask this question himself. Mark, cool. Would you unmute and ask your question?
Well, I asked one question about the data. Who are the buyers of the data? Big pharma? And then the other thing, I've seen other companies that go to the developing world, do deals with like the government of Rwanda or whatever, just to get scale for data. So just kind of, who are the buyers of data, and where does it come from?
Yeah, so when I said data, I meant therapeutic companies, and I meant preclinical and clinical data. But are you talking about like more in digital health or things like that, where you get access to data?
Just in general, kind of what's the value of data, where it comes from?
Well, my intent was to talk about like scientific data that you create, and that people see value in that.
I've seen it more from clinical trials, so pharmaceutical. They need 100,000 people that have gone through X.
I mean, that's one of the resources that your company, that the startup needs to get access to.
Okay.
So Brooke Byers invested in an eye company, and it was successful because they were able to license a very large database of patient eye information, and he knew exactly how to monetize it.
Okay.
Okay, let's pick up on this question. This is referring back to when we were talking about it's all relationships and it's who you know, and that you as an investor wouldn't just, take a look at something that came in over the internet. So this question is, where do you start? How do you find the person to talk to who then refers you to the investor?
It's you just got to start wherever you are, and you got to think about who you know and push it as far as you can.
I mean, this is what networking is all about. So the importance of networking, which admittedly is harder under COVID, but we can still do it. And it's really about making relationships. And, if I wanted to get to a particular investor, I know Carl, so I would say, hey, could you introduce me to Srini? I hear he's looking at stuff in the area that we're interested in. So it's just all a big network, and it takes a lot of time to build it up. There's no secret formula.
Yeah.
You just have to, in the old days, I would be out at entrepreneurship events like 3 nights a week, just hanging out, talking to people, and building relationships. That's how you do it.
One way to accelerate it is look at companies that are kind of like, but not exactly like what you want to do, and see who invested in those Series A's and talk to them, because they've done stuff like that before. Now, when you talk to them, they may not invest, but they may tell you some of the horror stories about, when I first, this sounded like a good idea, but here's the problem that really we struggled and suffered with. Talking to companies that have failed doing what you want to do, that can be incredibly valuable. And people, nobody's going to ask them like, why? So if you spend the time, you also have to nurture your network. It's not just like, with Stephanie, I've taught lots of classes and lectures, and I'm constantly amazed by the number of people that claim they know me. So it's there's this whole thing about you have 500 or 150 personal relationships. There's a scientist, and it's named after him, and he talks about building networks and how. So one of the best people at networking I know is a venture capitalist, and what she does is she nurtures her network. So when she meets people, she thinks about who should I connect them. And there are people out there that are connectors. There are people out there that are kind of like thought leaders and whatever. So I look at a lot of things, and I have a reputation for having a nose like, oh, I like that. And it's also, the question is like, who would be interested in this? So it's not written down anywhere. I think Mark said he's trying to help build a marketplace. This is the whole process is extremely inefficient. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's inefficient, but it's incredibly important. And I'll say, when someone asked me the other day, well, networking, is that like, LinkedIn, you ask someone to link with you? And I'm like, no, that's not networking. I don't even pay attention to LinkedIn requests from people I don't know. So I only link with people I think are actually people that are in my network. So yeah, that's not the way you do it. You don't do it by email. And it's a different skill set. It's one that's not always comfortable for scientists, because they by nature may not be extroverted. It does require that you make the effort, get out there and meet people. Let me go to another question. Are family office investors also considered angels? Do they operate and have the same requirements and criteria? So Carl, when you answer that, explain what a family office is.
Yeah, so family offices actually play a really large role in our economy, less of a role in biotech, but they are very, very active. So family offices are, when they talk about like the top 1/10 of 1% owns half of the wealth, this is them. So they invest in things, and they have the ability, and a lot of times they'll invest in things that they're interested in. So they can be very good in long-term investors, but they don't. But you don't want to be saddled. You've got to be aware that they may not know as much about as they should to be your sole investor.
Right. So they're very hard to find, and there's basically no place they congregate. It's not
they don't want to be found.
They don't want to be found. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I am reaching out to family offices right now, and without an introduction, it's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, another question. What's the biggest mistake you see founders pitching, or founders, and maybe you better define founders / pitchers. What are you asking here? Nate, can you speak up? Nate, I see you there. Unmute. Okay.
Oh,
Nate.
well, yeah, sorry. I just took a second to find the button. So you're clearly somewhat of an institutional, investor. And so my question is what, at least pitching to your type of organization, what types of mistakes do you see frequently?
My attitude has always been, I want the entrepreneurs to be at ease and be themselves. And I want to hear the idea. So sometimes they're too secretive about actually telling me what it is they're doing, and so I've got nothing to go on. So it's kind of a waste of everyone's time. There's also in IT fundraising, if people are interested, it's not unusual for them to say, "Oh, well, we'll discuss it and then we'll get back to you with the term sheet." It's like, I'm like, I could be like 10 meetings to a term sheet. So it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So you want to be, and also, so when you in biotech, when you talk to large corporations, they don't think your stuff works. Right.
Yeah.
And but they hope it'll work, so maybe they'll talk to you. And we're kind of the same way. We're even a lot of times the pitch is like within 10 minutes. I'm like, oh yeah, even if this works, I have absolutely no interest in it. And we can save each other a lot of time and effort by moving the conversation to, well, who does this sort of thing, or who does whatever.
Great. David Gordon, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Carl, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I was curious to hear your thoughts on platform companies.
Oh, yeah.
How you feel about people starting up, particularly in biotech, without necessarily having IP, but just having a great idea for how to look at things in a different way and build IP.
Yeah. So a couple points there. So first of all, platforms, you want to pull the platform towards the product opportunity, and a lot of times you can't do that unless you're working on a juicy problem. The other problem with platforms is everyone thinks, wow, this is a great platform. It can apply to this really broad area, like a lot of different application areas, a lot of different therapeutic areas. And that's a serious mistake, that you don't understand your platform, because it is very, very unlikely, even in the case of like CRISPR, all applications are not equally valuable and equally tractable. So what is the application of your platform that is the most valuable, that you can, with the amount of resources that an entrepreneur can marshal? So if you can do something really amazing with $10 to $20 million, now you have a business case. And that's way more interesting than I have a business case for every single therapeutic field, and I need to raise $1 billion. I'm going to need to spend $1 billion to actually prove, and I don't want to wait. I want to do each of those. And you got to start with one thing. The other thing about IP is only really valuable in the service of a business model. And so IP alone is not enough. And you don't know if you have IP that's going to be valuable with an early stage platform until you get a little ways in. I mean, you file it because you're hoping.
Great. Carlo, do you want to ask your question?
Hey, Carl, thanks again for joining and putting this great talk. My question is really just rather simple. I just am curious on how important business acumen is compared to the actual science for you to invest in a company. Just curious on how sophisticated someone must be in order to be able to kind of talk to you and go through that.
Well, I talk to just pure scientists all the time, so they don't need to have. But generally, for things to progress, you're going to need someone that, and I call them someone with the entrepreneur's mindset. They could have a PhD. They could. It doesn't. I mean, they, and it's a very hard industry because there's no set standard of how this stuff happens. Right? There's no cookie cutter model of how to do this. So, do you do partnership early? Do you do partnership late? So what I've been talking about is more the fundamentals of, there's nothing more dilutive than running out of money. So how do you build a financing path? And how do you get your investors, whether angels or the Series A, that's set up so that if you execute on the science, you will be able to fund the whole thing. So the most complicated things in business are simpler than the easiest things in science. So the thing I see scientists getting torn up on is they want to overthink it. So there are just rules of thumb in business, and sometimes it's easier just to if it's not a critical thing, just follow that rule of thumb. 15-20% stock option pool, right? Alex Zaffaroni invented that. Everybody
explain what that means, Carl.
Oh, so you need to have stock options for your employees. And so 20% of the value of your company is going to have to go to them to help attract the best people.
Thanks.
So equity is an important, because as a startup, you can't pay the kinds of salaries people could make in pharma. So you have to make it up with stock options. So people are betting on the come, that you're going to be successful. They're going to be a part of it, and they're going to be rewarded for that.
And Carlo works at Silicon Valley Bank, my favorite bank. I bank with them. Thank you.
Okay. Great. So, and there are some very specific questions in this list, which I'm going to pass on because I know there are some things that Carl might not be that familiar with. Although he opines on everything.
Like Raphael's question.
So I'm taking general questions.
Yeah.
So is there, if anyone else, I'm just going to open it up now so people can just unmute and ask the question. I hope it's not a tsunami of people. And also, if you need to leave because of the hour, please do that. We're over the hour, and I appreciate everybody coming tonight. But open to questions.
Well, first of all, let me just say, no, it never hurts to ask Raphael, what if I actually knew the answer to that question? Or even better, I was like, oh, my friend's an expert on that. I'll introduce you. So you don't know if you don't try.
What was the question?
Question was on, it was something I don't know anything about.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, but that's what we all try to do when we don't know it. We say, gee, this is outside my expertise, but talk to XYZ. And that's what the relationships and the networking is all about. Anyone else have something they'd like to ask about.
Yeah, to answer Raphael's question, any of the top universities that are in cancer research would be interested. For example, MD Anderson Cancer Center would be interested potentially. So would be Memorial Sloan. So you could start with those. You could also, in terms of organizations, you can look at the AACR, which is the American Association for Cancer Research. One option would be to attend one of their annual meetings. And then you'll run into a host of people at the intersection of cancer, people who are interested in AI, people who are interested in all of these other aspects, under one of which Raphael's work potentially falls. So the best way to do it, to meet the maximum number of people, would be to attend one of these conferences, because then, for example, AACR is a very prestigious conference for cancer researchers. You don't want to be meeting only MDs. You want to also meet those who have a PhD background or those who are potentially MD PhDs, because they are the kinds of people who would be interested in Raphael's work. So would attending the American Society of Cancer Oncology, ASCO. So those two would be places that I'd look up. And then if we wanted to specifically go to some institution that look at, that would be MD Anderson or Sloan. So that short answer to Raphael's question.
Now you got to repeat, Raphael, you have to repeat your question so everyone knows what we're talking about.
It's in the chat.
I know, I'm reading it just in case. So that's really good advice, Srikanth, about going to conferences. It's a great way to talk to a lot of people. It's very efficient. You know, back in the days when we were going to these things, you could make many contacts and have conversations that are very helpful in terms of identifying needs, how things work, and potentially lead for whatever it is you're looking for. Carl, do you want to add to that?
Sorry, I was reading the chat.
Raphael, I wanted to add one more thing. There is an entity called AAAS, American Academy for the Advancement of Science. So the best thing for you to do is it's the largest multidisciplinary science organization in the world, where you're going to see a spectrum of scientists from all hues. They have an annual meeting in Denver in April of next year. But more importantly, you can get a membership. You can start off with a basic membership, like a supporting membership, which is $25 a year, which is nothing. And once you get that, basically there are a number of communities in the AAS that you can join online. And you'll be amazed at the breadth and knowledge that you'll see there, because you'll automatically get invited to join those communities. Some of those you can join, and you'll meet so many people of so many hues that somewhere there'll be an intersection of people with your work and your interests. To start off, actually, that would be probably the first thing I would do. Join the AAS, $25. You'll get your $25 in a couple of hours. You'll get your $25 back in a couple of hours, because you'll definitely run into people with interest in your work.
Great. Yeah, so you can see with this group who's here on the call, there are going to be people who know lots of things that are helpful to others of you. That's part of what the networking thing is all about. And being part of a class like this, where there's a cohort where you're going through with an objective to learn and to make connections, it really facilitates. And Srikanth has offered to create an alumni group, right, Srikanth?
Yes, Stephanie, but it looks like Vineet in our group has already created a LinkedIn group.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we can start with that.
There you go. Okay. Anyone else want to ask Carl a question?
I have a quick question. So we all know that this COVID-19 situation is not normal, and everyone has a lot of problem to talk to you, like an investor and accelerator. what will be the best way to reach out to you or get your attention as an investor if I'm starting my startup? Please unmute.
Carl.
No, I'm sighing though. It's you know, I mean, for me personally, I'm just like, I've got so many cool things that are ready to rock and roll, and I need to raise money myself to take it to the next stage. So I brought on another person to join my firm and team to do it, and we were just talking about this today. So that's why you really need to get a referral, I think, from someone who knows. Like, it's not the fact that they know me, it's the fact that they know what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So the beer story that Stephanie hates, someone told him, hey, Carl likes the beer, Carl would be interested in this thing. He told me, I was instantly interested. And I didn't know him at all.
Yeah, you have to be very targeted. I don't hate that story, Carl. I just wanted it to be shorter. It's an okay story. Who else? I think the answer, Jerry, was you're not going to get to Carl because that's not where his head is right now. And he's got and that's an important learning for everybody, is you really have to understand, where the investors are in terms of the fund. So if a VC raised a fund 7 years ago, he probably doesn't have any dry powder left. Dry powder being money that he could invest. He's really looking to exit his companies. So making a sales call on that investor is a waste of time. I mean, they may take the meeting because they're interested in hearing what you're working on, but that doesn't mean they're going to be interested in investing. So it's really very individual. And before you approach an investor, you should learn as much as you can from other sources about that person, and then ask questions when you have the meeting, like, are you actively investing now, et cetera. So it's an art. It takes time to learn how to do it well, like anything else. And you don't just go trotting into an investor, do your pitch and leave, and consider that a good day.
Thanks.
So my partner, Mitchell Mutz, I knew him actually in graduate school, and I brought him into a meeting, and one of my partners fell asleep during the meeting, and the other one walked out before he ended without saying a word.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter that I knew him in graduate school.
Yeah. So a lot of bad manners in venture capital firms, I'm sorry to say.
I think it's gotten a little bit better.
I remember walking in with the team I was bringing forth to an investor, and they all started typing on their phones like in the first few minutes. So it's really, if you don't grab them right away somehow, you might write the whole thing off, and they're not very considerate about, at least those weren't, about the way they've written you off. Yeah, it's a difficult world, and how many investors do you need to call on until you get somebody who's interested? And that's a highly variable number depending on how hot the thing is that you're trying to sell, and the investor's interest. But it could be 100. I know entrepreneurs who've called on 150 or 80, or it could be 5 if you have something super hot.
I think there's also another point, which is, do you really have a business case? Because if you don't have a compelling business case, there's not a real, it's not something that venture people should fund anyhow.
Right. Yeah. So it's not just, I want to read what Bernie Fallon said. Bernie, would you like to say this? Are you still there? I would love him. Hi, let me introduce Bernie. Bernie is an executive with BIO, our industry organization.
Hello, everyone. If you're referring to the comment, I'm just trying to fall back that the prior question was about understanding, the investors interested in a particular technology or the research organizations, but there's a front edge to innovation, but that means there is something behind that, and that was there because someone had already studied it, already invested in it, and often they want to continue or develop, continued strength in that area. So one place for science, as was mentioned, are the cancer research centers who are already working on biomarkers. One place for investor interest, and that include corporate investor or corporate partners, would be those who are working in this space. I think implicit in where the conversation just was a minute ago is not all investors want everything. Investors have a flavor, a taste, something they are looking for, either a therapeutic area or a stage of development. Carl did mention how there are particular types of team constructions, teams approaches, team individuals who are appealing. So you need to do a little bit of the work to figure out what investor most wants to hear from you, because it is not truly sort of an open field in all areas. Because as Carl mentioned, once they've invested, they're in forever, or they decide how long they're in, and you want to live with someone who wants to be working with you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great comment. Thank you, Bernie. Yeah. Some other
and also I'd like to acknowledge Bernie's role in our ecosystem and really for contributing to innovation and stuff. It's good to see you, and whether it's the Spark, you did the Spark early access, you just a lot of innovative things. So don't be discouraged. There's a lot of people that want you to succeed.
Exactly, as been said by other, patients are waiting, but they're not waiting patiently, and there's an enormous amount of need here, and we're at a moment in history when the capital and the technology are ready to be deployed, and are being deployed in many great ways. And so anything such as this course that helps make those connections a little more efficient, is good for the system, good for people, good for patients, for the biopharma part of biotech. And thank you, Carl. I'm glad you're working on a new fund to be able to do more projects per year and get them a little farther along. So, and thank you, Stephanie, for setting up tonight's conversation.
And thank you, Bernie, for the support you and Bio have given this course.
Sure.
Much appreciated.
That's a good, from tiny acorns, mighty oaks grow. So
yeah, there you go. Well, we may have a lot of acorns here. I hope so. Another question, Raphael, you can ask your question. Raphael, you still there?
I am. Yes.
Okay. Your question about stage.
I'm sorry. What was it?
Okay, I'll ask it for you. How do you find out what stage in the angel's investment life cycle? What stage, I guess, the angel is in? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, your comment was, or somebody's comment, maybe it was Carl's, that it's important to understand whether the fund is already fully invested, or whether they've got funds that opportunities that are maturing, or whether they're looking for new opportunities. My question is, for angels, how do I find out whether the angel has made an investment recently, or does one a year and they've already used it up, or whether there's space? Do I go to TechCrunch or Crunchbase or something like that and see if I find their name? Like, what are the strategies for finding out what stage and how open an investor is to making an investment at that time?
It's a really, for the angel investors, it's really personal. So I'm going to have some angel investors in my fund.
Yeah.
And they're going to talk to their spouse, and they're going to actually already have some investments that they think are going to exit before the end of the year. It depends how well those do, and it's just it's a highly personal thing. I mean, angel investors are only good if that smaller amount of money can actually get you to a point where you can raise the more money, or you can actually get some resources, like either a corporate relationship or advance it. even in the life science angels, their biggest fear is that they'll invest as an angel and it won't be enough to get you where someone else will be interested.
Yeah. I think you can always ask an angel, are you currently investing? Just ask them to find out if they're a prospect for you.
Now, Mark Stoner's pointing out how expensive PitchBook is.
Yeah, we know. Yeah.
There's actually there's this new one.
Signal. By NFX.
Yeah, NFX is good.
Another data source for what? Oh, Cipher Bio. Okay. Okay. Well, we're getting close to NFX. Okay, what are they?
It's a venture fund.
NFX alternative to PitchBook. What does that mean? Raphael?
So PitchBook allows you to create like a document vault repository that you're able to share with investors or angels. And NFX, the parent company, has created a tool called Signal that allows you to connect with investors and also create a brief and share it with individual, and it tracks who has access to it and how many times they go in and open it, etc. So it's free, as opposed to with PitchBook, it's like thousands of dollars.
So it's like a data room. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Carlo, SVB's doing something with a group that has a database. I forget.
Yeah, it's Cipher Bio. Matt Gibbs created it. Has a lot of great info on investors and incubators and all that, and it's strictly for life science. So I recommend that. I mean, it's SVB, so
could you maybe get the students of this class some access to it for the life of the class?
It's free. You just have to register online.
Oh wow,
so.
It's really good.
Cipher Bio. Okay.
Cipher Bio.
And tell people who aren't familiar with PitchBook what kind of data you're looking at or you think you're doing. Carlo, can you explain what kind of data do you have?
For Cipher Bio, we have great info on investors, what they're investing in. Also, we have good insights on the incubators. If you are interested in joining an incubator, how much they've invested, or how their companies that have worked with them, how much they've gotten investments on, even individual companies. You can even look up specific industries and specific markers to see what kind of investments have been out there and have already been done. So
great, sounds very useful.
It's really good.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, well, you should always research your investors before you approach anybody to try to understand what they're interested in, what stage of company they're interested in, what areas they're investing in, and before, you don't want to just put a shot out in the dark. You want to try to match what you're doing, what you have. All right, I think on that note, it's just about 6:30 here in Pacific time zone. It's well past cocktail time. Sorry I couldn't serve any tonight. I want to thank you all for, thank you, Carl, just circulating it around.
Looks cool.
And I hope that you'll join the class and be part of what's going to be a super interesting cohort, a number of whom are on this call. And I'm excited about doing this class. It's going to be great learning, great fun, great networking. And we'll be doing lots more interesting things. So thank you for coming tonight, and have a good weekend.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for arranging this. It was very fun.
Thank you, Carl. Thanks for being our investor of the evening. We appreciate it. And good luck with the new fund.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.